Hi and welcome to the Leather Repair Company with a help video about how to sew up a seam that has burst open and the stitching has broken, as you can see here on this seat base. Obviously things do get worn and things do break open. The stitch that you can see that we pointed out there at the top and bottom, that is just an overstitch. It's just to fold over the pleat there to obviously give you like a decorative top stitch. The actual stitch itself is side to side in the middle of that, which we're obviously going to demonstrate how to do that. That's the type of thread. That is a very strong thread that we're going to use there that you need, which is the same thread that seats would have been sewn together with in the first place. Obviously with this particular type of seat, because the thread is broken, we need to obviously expose some more of it. That is your curved needle that we will use to go in and out on the seat. So with it, we need to take some more of the thread out. We're not actually cutting it here. We're actually unpicking some more of the thread, because what we need to do is we need to leave a tail at either end. That is where you're going to lock off the actual new thread that you're going to sew in to sew the seat together. You need to leave sufficient so that you can lock those off and tie them together, so that obviously the new thread doesn't come undone again. So just using like a sharp object without cutting the actual thread, unpick sufficient to leave enough tails top and bottom. As you can see there, we've got a nice tail at the top end and a nice tail at the bottom end there, which is going to allow us to sort of obviously sew that off. Check that, make sure that there's no thread left in your holes where it's bust open. If there is, remove any thread before you start proceeding with the sewing process. Obviously thread your cotton through your curved needle, put the thread through there, the curved needle, and get this ready to be tied into position. So obviously once that's in place, we can then start to begin to obviously get the sewing work done here on this particular seat. Getting the first one in is obviously the trickiest part, I would say, because you've got to try to go into into the old holes. Plus you've got the top stitch there, which is making it difficult to obviously stitch through the side. So get the first lot of cotton pulled through. You might end up getting tangled here with your loop that you left, with the tail that you left. So get enough pulled through so that you've got your tail and the original tail as well that you can see there. So you've got the two tails. Those you're going to tie together at the end. So we just need to continue, proceeding through. Obviously, you got that top stitch and bottom stitch there, which is just a decorative stitch. It's just a pleat. It's to keep the pleat folded over. And we're just going to go through there, which is where the old thread is, and we're going to lock through and actually fill in there. So you've got to come through and obviously lock that off. You want to keep going into the original existing holes that's on the seat itself. Go into the hole and then come out again. Obviously this can be a time-consuming job because you've got to deal with that top stitch that's already in position, because you can't go undoing that, or else you're going to end up with like a loose sort of piece of item there. And obviously with no top stitch, then you've got to try to sew the top stitch as well, which is just going to make it even more difficult. So just pull that in straight through and pull like so. Just got the just tied off there. Just want to undo that so it's not too tight. But it's just got it just sufficient, so it's just got that tied. So they're now tied together with the new piece of thread. The original thread and the new thread tails, they're obviously just tied off there. And that's got it perfect and pulled that tight. So they're now secure. We will tie those off at the end also. And it's just a matter of going in and out of every hole now, getting those, getting the sewing stitch together and getting that resolved. Just being careful, obviously, not to stab yourself with the needle. If you catch the tails, just take them out. What you're not wanting to do at this stage is you're not wanting to actually pull the thread tight. You're just trying to go through and make the make it loose, because we're going to pull that all tight at the very end. So you're just going to go through and get them sewn into position. We will pull it tight at the end, which you'll see as we go further on. Obviously, if your needle comes out, make sure you grab the right one, pull it through again, and then just re-feed the thread back through the eye of the needle. And just keep sewing. Got to go through all the original holes. Don't create new holes, because obviously you're going to weaken the leather itself, as a sort of top tip. Just go in and out of the original holes, going from side to side, creating like a loop system. As you can see, we're just going through there with the loop system, in and out of each hole. Some of them could be tight, tougher than others to get through. If they are, then you can sort of use like a pair of pliers to hold the needle to pull that through to give you assistance. And just keep pulling through the thread to close off the gap. As you can see, it's not been pulled tight, which is not what we're wanting to do at this sort of time. We're just wanting to get the thread in position by going through all the original holes. This is the same sort of process that you can do. It's not just on a bolster base like this particular one is here. If you've got like a seam on the center of a seat, top or bottom, or even on anything else like a piece of furniture, this is the same sort of process that you would use to fix those seams that are broken open. You just need a good quality thread. You don't want anything like a wax nylon or anything like that. You want a good quality thread, proper heavy duty sewing machine thread, which is what the seats would have been sewn with in the first place. And then a good quality curved needle. You just see us pulling that through there and just creating that. It's not tight, as you can clearly see. Whether it's a seam here, like you see on the outside edge of the bolster, they're going to take a lot of wear and tear getting in and out of a car. So they're some of the sort of like most common areas to go is there, or an upper bolster gets quite broken with abrasion getting in and out with clothing. That can quite easily damage the actual thread on the seat and actually cause that to break. Incorrect cleaners can also cause a problem here with rotting the stitching. Steam cleaning, with excessive heat, incorrect cleaners like an all-purpose cleaner can degrade the stitching as well. So you've got to be careful with things like that you don't create these problems, on the actual thread. As you can see there, it's not tight. We're not wanting to get that tight at all. It's a matter of just getting the stitching done. At the very end, we will pull all of this tight into position and tie off the tails at either end. Very similar process to doing a steering wheel as well, where the steering wheel may have come undone. It's just a slightly different process on the steering wheel. Instead of going from hole to hole, you're going to go to a hole, skip a hole, come back, tie it, go again, skip a hole, come back, sew it, skip a hole, come back, etc., etc., with any steering wheel work. And going obviously from side to side, just like we are here. If there's any type of sort of video that you would like to see from us that can help you with any type of guides, don't hesitate to ask in the comments. You can find all the helpful guides and tips in the comments on the bio for this video. You can hop on over to our website with all the help guides in, leatherrepaircompany.com. There is also the Wikipedia site of leather, which you can get onto as well, which is prorestorers.co.uk. It's just a very tedious process of getting the thread pulled through, but eventually you'll get there and it'll sew up all that seam and you'll be back to normal again. We're about halfway through now with the sewing. We're trying to do this as slow as we can so that you get the idea and you can follow the video as closely as possible to ensure that you can actually do this by stopping and starting to make sure that you can actually get this done. As I say, you just got to be careful you don't stab yourself with this needle. You can get like particular like threading gadgets to put on your fingers to help you push the needle through if you wanted to. They can help, or as I say, if you do get stuck, with it getting the needle through, just use a pair of pliers and grasp the needle and sort of push it through. But don't create new holes. Go in and out of your existing holes for definite. You definitely don't want to create new holes and create even bigger problems. You can see there the pattern that it's created as we've gone through doing the sewing. It's not an easy job to get them through, but you've got to try to get them through those existing holes and get them all the way through, trying to bend the leather. It's the same, no matter what sort of seam it is that you're working on, it can work on these. Obviously, like a false seam is totally different to this type of seam here. A false seam is normally stitched internally and then obviously given like a decorative stitch on the top. Like this has got a decorative stitch here, a top stitch either side to fold off the pleat that's been created to give it strength, so that once this seam had been done, they then sew off the top stitch to give it a little bit of strength so that that top stitch isn't floating around. You can see there we've got the two tail ends at either ends, and once you pull that tight, you'll see that that's all going to close up and close all the gap. Get it pulled tight. You can use the pliers to pull that tight and just nip that up, and that'll nip through. You can see there just nipping that in, what we're talking about, nipping that into position. So just use the awl and just pull them tight like so. And you're just going to proceed to do that along the whole length of the actual item, getting your threads and just pulling each piece of thread really nice and tight. There are several methods of doing this particular process, but this is just one of the many methods that you can potentially use to sew this off, and just pulling each piece, each sort of thread, each stitch thread tight. So just go through pulling them tight, and you can see there it's coming together really nicely, and you can see that it's giving a real good, nice, secure seam, and just pulling that tight as you're going along and just keeping that in position. Just got to keep getting everyone and pulling it tight. You just keep pulling the loops down, and then eventually once it gets to the very end, you've got a long tail which you can then tie off with the existing tail, and you've got a fantastic, perfectly sealed seam that isn't bust open and going to start creating further damage, to obviously cost you even more money to resolve the actual issue with your seat in the first place. As you can see there, we're not far off the end, and it's really pulled tight, and you've got a fantastic secured seam without creating any further damage by by making any more holes. It's saved taking the skin off the seat and risking damage to clips, because a lot of the clips internally are all plastic clips. It saved that risk of damaging those plastic clips and replacing those also. Obviously, you could do it that way by taking all the cover off the seat, and then obviously taking the clips off and putting that through a machine. Yes, it would be a lot quicker to do that, but you run the risk of the clips breaking internally within the seat. So you just got to bear that in mind, that when you're doing this job, this can be sewn by hand, as you've seen here. And this is just one of many methods that you can do to resolve this. You can see there where we've got that really nice and tight, and it's sewn all that off. It's just a matter of going through and getting that clipped, pulled into position. And that's pulled everything tight, and as you can see there they are. Beautiful. And it's just a matter of tying those ends off. Once they're tied off, you've got a really nice tight seam again, fully sewn up, and you're back to able to use your seat again. Just tie it around in a loop and tie into a knot, and just simply tie in and then snip off. You can pull that tight with a pair of pliers to make sure it's really nice and tight. Just pull it really tight so that that's the original tail that we've got there that's slightly frayed from the seat, and then the black tail at the top is the new tail that we've put in, is the new thread. Any sort of help or guidance that you need with any types of repairs that you're doing on seats, please head on over to the website leatherrepaircompany.com. Thank you very much.